Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, welcome to the live stream. We're so glad you guys are back. Just a quick announcement. If you have not registered for CIY Move, that is for high schoolers. And if we're in 8th grade and you're going into high school next year, you are able to go. So go to auburnseastone.info. I'll put the link right here. Under the Students tab, you'll find a place to register. The CIY trip's going to be July 24th, 25th, and 26th. It's $75. We're going to have 3 days where we're engaging with the material, literally I have down to my cousin Jim videos. So I've got everything we would possibly watch at CIY, and we're going to go 3 sessions, and we're going to work through those together. We're going to have some cool activities, fun games, and stuff like that. So again, it's going to be July 24th, 25th, and 26th, but our registration deadline is July 10th. So if you have not registered for it, or if you want friends to go with you, or they want to go or are interested in going, get them to register at, again, auburnseastone.info. Under the Students tab, register by July 10th. That's all I got. So this is week 2 now of home groups. Let's dive right in. We're going to continue our series in origin stories. So without further ado, roll that buffer footage. All right, what's up, guys? So last week we talked about using the story of Captain Marvel and how we have been given a power based upon Jesus, based upon the Holy Spirit. And oftentimes we don't understand what the power that we have until we understand what our mission actually is. And a lot of times that mission is to care for those who need to be cared for. Some of those who desire to be loved more than we realize. Those who are suffering injustices. Because the thing is we are created in the image of God. Jesus was the image of God, even though we are just a reflection. But just because we are created in the image of God, it also means that others are created in the image of God, and they should be cared for all the same. So this week, we're going to be talking about how heroes care for those who are in front of them. So we're going to be looking at the passage in John 13, 1 through 17. So as you guys are turning there, I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory. So this is a time when Jesus was in his ministry, where he was preparing for the Last Supper. He was getting ready to pay the ultimate sacrifice, the most selfless act he could have possibly done. And he's meeting with his disciples for dinner. Now, when we come to this passage, again, it's the Passover. So this is a big meal that he's going to be having with the disciples. And as we'll read in the passage, Judas has already decided he's going to betray Jesus. And Jesus knew that. All right, so keep that in mind as we are reading this passage. So again, we're in John chapter 13. We're going to read 1 through 17. Again, I'm in the ESV, just in case it's different and you're wondering why. This is now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with a towel that that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered, What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterwards you will understand. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and head. Jesus said to him, The one who has bathed does not need to wash, except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him, and that was why he said, not all of you are clean. Then he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place. He said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you the example that you also should do just as I have done for you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. So, Jesus is, again, he's preparing to go on the cross, facing this ultimate selfless act. And here he is performing yet another selfless act for these disciples. You got to remember, at that time, the disciples or the people that day didn't have like closed-toed shoes like we do today. I mean, they didn't even have boots, which is, for me, is hard to believe. But at the time, they had sandals. And you got to remember, they walked everywhere they went. I mean, their feet were probably disgusting. You got to remember, they didn't bathe every day either. So imagine how bad your feet smell and think about how bad their feet smell. Trudging through dirt and grime and mud and animal droppings. I mean, all of the stuff that they're literally just walking throughout their days. Jesus took the place of a servant. Now, like in a home, when you had people over for dinner, you would have a servant that was considered the lowest of the low. Like, he was the low man on the totem pole. He was probably getting paid the least. He was probably the youngest. But his job was to wash people's feet before they came into the house. It was both a way of keeping the house clean, keeping the smell down, but also as a way of serving your guests for dinner. Jesus took it upon himself to take the lowest position of the lowest servant to wash the feet of the disciples. I mean, not only did he wash their feet, but he was drying them on like the towel that was wrapped around him. So, I mean, that was probably getting onto his clothes and all of these things. Like, he was taking this act and this position of servanthood for his disciples. And the hardest part to believe about that, he washed Judas's feet too. He knew Judas was going to betray him. Judas knew he was going to betray him. Yet Jesus still washed his feet. I mean, even after that, he washes their feet. He says this to them. We're in verse 34 and 35. It says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And see, that's the thing, guys, is when we want to be real heroes, we have to love the people that sometimes are just right in front of us. I mean, whether that be your family or your close friends, like, these people sometimes are the ones that need it the most. These are also the people that are going to know that you are a follower of Christ. You can be that hero to them just by loving them well. I can think of a story. So back when I was in college, I had a nice car. I had a 1996 Camaro Rally Sport. It was pretty sweet. I had realized rims on it. I had a new exhaust on it. It was awesome. I got it for a really good deal. But I was showing off to a couple of my friends. And I was doing a U-turn, which in Virginia they're allowed. So, okay, relax in the comment section. I was doing a U-turn, and as I did it, I hit the gas harder than I needed to, and I fishtailed a little bit. Little did I know there was a cop right at that intersection Had no idea. He pulls me over and he gives me a reckless driving ticket, which it was pretty reckless, but in Virginia, a reckless driving ticket is like jail time. Like, it's a very serious offense. I mean, that officer was yelling and screaming at me like I've never been treated like that before. But I was super afraid, right? I was thinking, okay, like, I'm in big trouble here. You know, I was on a leadership team where I was a prayer leader, which basically I was a small group leader in my college dorm. And we had a small group leaders meeting with our prayer warriors. And I was talking about this. I was like, guys, like, I potentially could serve a year in jail and up to $2,500 in fines for this. I was like, I'm really freaking out. Like, I had to hire a lawyer and all of this other stuff. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. I was working as a coffee barista at the time, and I was working part-time, and I was a full-time college student. So I was just like, I don't know how this is going to happen. I was like, I'm really afraid. And I went back to my room afterwards. We prayed and talked me through it. And somebody had like put $40 into my door. No note, no, hey, I hope this helps. It was just an envelope with my name on it, slipped under my door. And I tell you, like, $40 is not a lot. You know, I mean, like, it's more than I had. But it was a small thing. I ended up finding out who it was, which I probably shouldn't have pushed, but looking at it now. Anyways, that was a really, like, an act of kindness that spoke to my heart. I mean, it was a need that I had. It was something that was right in front of this person. And they're like, you know what? I can do something to contribute to that. I can love Joe well. And I tell you, that meant so much to me. Again, it was something super small. You know, it was just putting it in my door. But I felt loved. I felt cared for. You know, I don't know what that person had to sacrifice at that time in order to do that. I mean, in college, $40 can get you a lot. But they still felt like they needed to care for me. And that's the thing is, when we choose to love through sacrifice, people understand the value that has been placed on them by you and by God. Jesus did it through washing the disciples' feet before he died on the cross. He sacrificed dignity. He sacrificed social norms. He sacrificed cleanliness in order to serve the disciples. And it shows how he loved unconditionally, even by washing Judas's feet. And that's the thing, is that when he gives that command in 34 and 35, that we're to love one another just as I have loved you, for you all also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, for if you love one another. And Jesus said that he gave the example of how we are supposed to love people. And because of the way we love people, it's how people are going to know that we follow Christ. So I want to look at these 4 words as we think about this idea of being a hero by loving others. There's awareness, listening, interpretation, and sensitivity. Okay? So first, awareness. Kind of like we talked about, like, we have to be the first step in caring for people. Like we talked about before, the first thing we have to be, the first step in caring for people that are right in front of us is to be aware of the needs that they have. Sometimes it could be just asking, like, hey, like, what can I pray for you about? Hey, what's been going on in your life? We have to, like, be aware of their needs. Next is listening. If we want to care for people in front of us, we must actively listen to what they say. Now, when I say actively listening, I don't mean hearing parts of the conversation, thinking about what you're going to say next, and just waiting for them to be done. That is not active listening. That is passive listening. Active listening is engaging with what they're going to say without regards to how you are going to respond. Like right now, most of you are probably passively listening, thinking about what you're going to do afterwards, thinking about when is this weird YouTube video going to end. Some of you are probably thinking, all right, Joe, I've had enough, right? I don't know. Actively listening, though, actively listening is listening with participation. It's not contributing in conversation. It's the engagement. It's eye contact. It's focusing in on what they're saying, interpreting what they're saying into your head, and thinking about what that means. Which brings me to the third thing, which is interpretation. If we want to care for people in front of us, we have to think about how our words can be interpreted, not only what we meant the words to be. I am terrible with this. There's all the times where I externally process, where I just talk about my thoughts out loud to help function or figure out what my thoughts are. And I'll say things that I'm working through, but someone gets hurt by the words that I say. Even though it's not what I meant, it is what I said. So we have to be aware of the interpretation that we may be giving. So for example, if someone's in need and we say, oh yeah, I'll pray for you, and we have the resources to help their needs, we just don't have the desire, how is that going to be interpreted? Or if we share stuff on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, how does that speak to somebody else's heart who may see it? What is their interpretation of what they're reading going to be? All right, and the last thing is sensitivity. Another thing I struggle with. But if we want to care for people in front of us, we must be sensitive to experiences and perspectives we don't fully understand. Sometimes our hearts might be right, but our mouths are just not. If someone is talking to us about an experience that they have or something that they are feeling, it is not our place to tell them that their feelings or their experiences are wrong. Sorry about you. If they experience those things, if they feel those things, right or wrong, they felt them and they experienced them. We can talk to them. We can offer different perspectives, but we have to be sensitive to the fact it's their experience, not ours. So in the next few minutes, we're going to take some time to have some discussion questions. I want to pray with you before we do that, but just be thinking about those four things. So again, we have awareness, listening, interpretation, sensitivity. Awareness is being aware of the needs that are around us. And listening is to be actively listening to what they're saying. Interpretation is to think about what we are trying to communicate versus what we are actually communicating. And sensitivity is identifying that what others may be feeling or thinking, and be aware, be sensitive to those things. So let me pray with you before we go into our discussion questions. Hair's not as crazy today. Okay. Dear Lord, I just want to thank you, Lord, that we can go and open your word, Lord, and learn from it. Lord, I pray that you would just help us to learn to love people well. Lord, that so that people can see and know that we are yours. Lord, you set the example. You gave us the ability to love people the way you did. Please help us, Lord, to love people with that example. We pray all this in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen. Love you guys. See you next week.